Andy took an unprovoked jab at me a few minutes ago about me not cooking breakfast, but he's not familiar with my long-standing policy. I've never preached with bacon grease on my clothing. I've held that my whole life, and he's just unfamiliar with that. So, I looked up a few of the predictions for 2024, which is right around the corner here within hours. One of them is that a lot of people are going to lose their job this year due to AI, artificial intelligence. Conversely, a lot of those same people, because of artificial intelligence, will start their own business, and ChatGPT will map out a business plan and guide them to success. That's one prediction. Here's another, that senior citizens may buy themselves a home assistant robot to help with cooking and cleaning, to enable them to live at home independently longer. Okay? Here's another prediction for this year, that alternative housing will become trendy. People by choice will live in a houseboat or a tiny home. I've seen them, school buses or shipping containers. And here's another one, the last one. 2024 will be the year of the soup. The year of the soup. On grocery shelves, soup and soup fixings and preparations will take up more space on the shelves in the grocery stores. Okay, we'll see. We'll see how those things play out. I don't know about those things, but here's a prediction, my own prediction, that I know to be true. I know this, 100%. Here it is. You and I will continue to face conflict in our relationships. This year, we will all struggle from time to time to get along with the people that we interact with routinely, even those people that we love the most. Unless Jesus returns this year and changes this heart, that is our lot. Here's another prediction that I know to be true as well. If you and I apply God's wisdom to our relationships, we can keep those times of conflict from getting out of hand. By implementing the wisdom that God has provided for us in this book, we will be far more successful in our relationships than we would be without applying the wisdom from this book. And that's another prediction that I know to be true. Sociologists tell us that you and I can identify up to 1,500 people, meaning we can put a name with a face with 1,500 people. But more importantly for our sermon today, sociologists tell us that at any given time in our lives, we can only interact with just up to 150 people. We have in our circle of active relationships up to just 150 people. The people themselves change, but the number remains essentially that. This past summer, I spent a couple of hours sitting at a bus stop outside in Boston, Massachusetts. I was waiting for a bus to take me from Boston, Massachusetts to Portland, Maine, about a 3-hour ride. So while I sat there and watched, I observed a steady stream of these large commercial coach buses just glide up to the curb. The door would open, bus rider would come out, and then out would pop an assortment of passengers, like a businessman with a briefcase, mom holding a baby, college student with a backpack. After those people left the bus, another line of people stood up to get on the bus and to fill those empty seats. Driver checked the tickets, stow their luggage. Everybody gets back on, door closes, and he drives away. And that simple, mundane scenario played itself out over and over during my brief stay in Massachusetts. And that scenario that I observed is a reasonable analogy for what we all experience throughout our lifetime. Here's what I mean. You and I are like drivers of a bus with limited seats. And as the years roll on, people enter our lives. And as the years roll on, people exit our lives. Yet the number of people that we interact with remains roughly the same. On your bus this morning, maybe your mom and dad. My parents were on my bus until this past year. You may have siblings on your bus. My wife, Leslie, says she actually remembers the day that her little sister entered her life. Leslie was less than 3 years old, but she remembers little Cindy being brought home, wrapped in a blanket as an infant from the hospital. And so Cindy entered her life many years ago, and Cindy has remained a beloved companion to this very day. Some of you have engaged in going to college recently, and some new people have entered your life. But chances are, in time, when you graduate, many of those people will step off the bus and drift off into the rearview mirror. So filling the seats on the bus might be a spouse, you might have children, you might even have grandchildren, extended family, neighbors, co-workers, and dear friends from Centerpoint Church. They all occupy seats on your bus today. And for your women, the best seat on the bus is reserved exclusively for, I know this, your hairdresser. Just got to have that seat for that woman. By the providence of God, those are the 150 people that with whom we do our talking and our working and our playing and our laughing and our worshiping and our crying. And by the providence of God, those are the 150 people that you and I need to get along with. Paul says in Romans 12, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men, meaning all men that we interact with. In other words, it's our God-given responsibility to keep peace with the people on our bus. So how do we do that? How can we keep peace on the bus? That's our subject for this morning. And here is the broad brush answer to that question. We can keep peace on the bus by doing this, by managing conflict with wisdom, by managing conflict with wisdom. Of those people in your active circle, I'm guessing there may be one or two with whom you have had not a moment's conflict. From the moment they stepped into your life to this present day, it has been smooth sailing. But for the other 148 of the people on the bus, it's a different story because every relationship experiences conflict from time to time. This side of heaven, that's the way it is. And to the extent that we apply wisdom to those times of conflict, we position ourselves for peace. Obviously, there are no guarantees. We cannot control the passengers, but we can control how we treat those passengers. In fact, it's the only thing we can control. And to the extent that we handle those times of inevitable conflict, we greatly increase our odds of getting along. So how can we keep peace on the bus? By managing conflict with wisdom. In the book of Proverbs, there are almost 100 verses that address this subject of handling conflict in relationship. And this morning, we're going to look at every single one of them in detail. I'm kidding. How about 9 of them? 9. And I'm going to put all 9 of those verses on the screen for you as we move along. I spoke on these very 9 verses about 4 years ago, and I'm really happy to take another shot at them. This is very helpful for me, and I truly believe that this sermon, this wisdom from God, will enhance your lives. I really believe that. I've organized these 9 verses into 3 distinct strategies for managing conflict. When somebody hurts us, when things get tense, when tempers start to rise, we need to do this. And here is the very first strategy. If we want to manage conflict and keep peace on the bus, we need to take time before we respond. Rather than just blurting out the first caustic words that come to mind, we need to say nothing. We just need to allow some time to pass before we respond, before a syllable comes out of our mouth. It's so clear, so elementary, and so helpful. We see this in Proverbs chapter 17, verses 28. Even a fool is thought to be wise if he is silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. According to this verse, the wisest response to conflict when we are provoked is to actually make no response at all. We are to, the verse says, remain silent. We are to hold our tongue. When we go to the dentist, from time to time, he will literally, if you go to my dentist, literally grab your tongue and pull it out about 4 inches and then move it left and right so you can get a good look inside, see what's going on there. Inevitably, when he's got our tongue in his hand, he'll say, "How's your family? What's going on at work?" It's a little hard to answer there. You got my tongue between your fingers. And that's the point. We can't speak when we're holding our tongue. And Solomon wants us each to hold our own tongue figuratively. To hold our own tongue. Refuse to answer. Allow a little time. We're to stifle that urge to speak. And had King Solomon envisioned our present technology, he would have added, and the wise person keeps his phone in his pocket. We have a tendency to draw our phones like a pistol and just fire away with a nasty text or a conversation, and that is pure foolishness, and that does nothing to achieve peace. So when something goes sideways, when someone in our life does something to hurt us, let's use time to our advantage. Often, if we provide just that little buffer zone between the offense and our response, that's all we need to diffuse the conflict and restore the peace. Okay, here's another verse that amplifies the same thought. Those who control their tongue will have a long life. How about that? Opening your mouth can ruin everything. Wow. I learned that the hard way when I was 12 years old. I almost forfeited my long life by opening my mouth. I was playing Monopoly with my buddy Johnny on the back porch. We had a screened-in back porch at my home, and we were sitting on opposite sides of a picnic table, playing Monopoly, eating chips, drinking soda. All was right in the world until my older brother Bill decided to join us, in a sense, and just start bugging us. He just came out and just started bugging us. My friend Johnny said, "Billy, leave us alone." All right, I'm thinking, well, it's 2 against 1. I'm going to abandon all caution. I think I might as well chime in as well. And I said to my big brother Bill, who was 3 years older and much stronger than me, standing on the opposite side of the table, I said, "Yeah, get out of here, zit face." To this day, I don't know how a human being got across a table that fast. In a millisecond, he was on me, administering the beating that I asked for. Now, I did live to tell the story, but not by much. All right, we laugh at that, but it's not funny when our opening our mouths causes irreparable harm, and it can. I read just recently of a 13-year-old boy who was actually gunned down outside a church in Gary, Indiana. The reason? He had posted a few nasty words about someone on social media. His mother's comments were interesting. She said, all he said were words. He never touched or harmed anyone. But yet we just read in Proverbs that we don't need to physically touch someone to cause harm. Opening our mouth can ruin everything. I wonder how many friendships? How many marriages? How many churches have been obliterated by somebody opening his mouth instead of controlling his tongue? All right, I have one more verse that encourages us to delay our response when somebody does something hurtful. A fool shows his annoyance at once, but a prudent man overlooks an insult. When we resist that urge to show our annoyance at once, we buy the time we need to discern whether the offense is a mountain or a molehill. Is it something that we really need to address, or is it something we can simply let go, overlook, as the verse says? It is sadly in all of our nature to make a federal case out of the slightest infractions. But if we pause before we respond, it is quite possible that with the kindness of God, we can extend grace to the offender, cut that person some slack, and simply overlook the offense entirely. History tells us that the Civil War began with a single shot. The war lasted 4 years with countless casualties. In our relationships, when we are annoyed, it is wise to think twice before we take that shot. So if we want to keep peace on the bus, we need to manage conflict with wisdom by doing this, by taking time before we respond. That's the first strategy for keeping peace on the bus. But as you well know, not all conflict can be overlooked or should be overlooked. There are times when somebody says or does something that needs to be addressed. It's at those times, when we've determined that we cannot just sweep it under the carpet, it's at those times that we need to employ the second strategy, and here it is. We need to craft our response carefully. We need to craft our response carefully. If we decide this is something we need to address, we need to employ that strategy. If our words are chosen well, if our tone is right, and if we put some serious thought into how we're going to respond, we just might be able to right the ship. Conversely, if we just charge onto the battlefield with both guns blazing, we will inevitably make things worse than they needed to be. And we may even possibly sever a relationship with so much at stake. We need to craft our response carefully, whether it's a face-to-face conversation, a text, a letter, Morse code, smoke signal, you name it. Put some thought into our response. There are a bunch of verses in Proverbs that define a well-crafted response. So here's one of them. Reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Reckless words pierce like a sword. Tongue of the wise brings healing. This verse is getting to the motive behind our engaging in the conflict. Our motive is to bring healing. You see that? Our motive is not to pierce. It means our motive is to restore the relationship, not to destroy the relationship. Our motive is redemption, not revenge. And guys, we need to be committed to that ourselves. And somehow through our tone, our facial expressions, we need to convey that to the listener before we engage. We're here for redemption, on the same team. Let's say you were about to undergo surgery, and the surgeon wanted to just have a few words with you, and he comes into the room and he has a sword strapped to his hip. You might think, I chose the wrong surgeon, because a sword is meant to destroy. Both a sword and a scalpel cut, but a sword destroys and a scalpel is designed to heal. When we attempt to resolve a conflict with reckless words, we are in effect doing surgery with a sword, and will do more harm than good. Happens every time. Recently, I witnessed a mom carefully correct her very rude little boy. She used her words like a scalpel to instruct and explain. Her son didn't like what she was saying, I could tell that, but he cooperated, and I'm betting that relationship just chugged right along as it should. Conversely, I witnessed a mom wield her words like a sword, saying insulting things to her daughter in public. Now, that daughter did cooperate, did do what her mother insisted on, but I am sure that the relationship suffered. Two moms, two kids, two vastly different responses. One set out to heal, the other set out to hurt, and both accomplished their objective. In all our responses to conflict, whether it's with a spouse or a sibling, at someone at this church, our words must convey redemption and healing. If they don't, get prepared to have an empty seat on your bus. Here's another characteristic of a well-crafted response. A well-crafted response is defined by gentleness. Gentleness. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. A lot of wisdom in that. With some people, when tensions rise, we can be blunt. Not hurtful, but we can be blunt. But with most people, by far, when we're addressing a conflict, we need to be very, very gentle. When we address a conflict, we need to envision that moment like a pot on a stove at 205 degrees. It's getting near the boiling point. Our words are very likely to determine what happens next. With harsh words, we turn up the burner and the pot boils over. But with gentle words, it's like we're turning down the dial and the pot cools down. It is wise to assume in those tense, uncomfortable moments that the words that we need to speak are precisely the words that that person does not want to hear. So if we say those words in a harsh manner, we don't stand a chance. The only thing that's going to happen, we're going to stir up anger. Wise people, according to Solomon, find a way to convey hard truth in a winsome, gentle manner. Another way of looking at it, addressing conflict is like disabling a loaded mousetrap, a spring-loaded mousetrap. You've done that? How about a rat trap, even worse? One false move and snap. You and I are to handle these matters ever so gently. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Okay, so far we've seen that a well-crafted response is redemptive in tone and word, and a well-crafted response is gentle. And the next verses to tell us that a well-crafted response is short. It's made up of few words. When words are many, Solomon says sin is not absent. And another one, a truly wise person uses few words. Now, there are times, and you know it, when a long discussion needs to take place. It might even take place over days or weeks to work through an issue. Every marriage has gone down that road. But in many cases, a few well-chosen words are sufficient. And as a rule of thumb, more words just mean more trouble. And Solomon would roll over in his grave if he got a glimpse at how many words are exchanged in our culture today. With our present technology, we are drowning in words. And if these verses from Proverbs applied back then, how much more today? Nowhere is his advice more helpful than when addressing conflict. Not too long ago, I was standing in a relationship minefield with an individual that I loved. Things were tense. I knew I had to respond. So I interacted with a friend of mine, and he helped me craft a response. 8 words. 8 words. I actually rehearsed those 8 words. I made a promise to him. I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to say those 8 words. So the time came for me to make the phone call. And I spoke 8 words. Didn't speak 9, didn't speak 109. And glory to God, the relationship was restored. I'm convinced if I said more, if I elaborated, if I waxed eloquent, I would have said some stupid things, and that relationship may have very well gone the wrong direction. In this uncomfortable arena of navigating conflict, less is usually more. A wise person uses few words. And here's one final characteristic of a well-crafted response. A well-crafted response is limited to current events. It's limited to current events. He who covers over an offense, Solomon says, promotes love. But whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. He who covers over an offense promotes love. He who repeats the matter separates close friends. Covering over an offense is a routine component of healthy relationships. We do things to hurt each other. We talk it through. It's like we bury it in the ground. We cover it over. That's what God does for us. That's what we do for each other. He who covers over an offense seeks love. In other words, we bury the hatchet. We bury the hatchet. But tragically, all too often in the heat of the battle, we remember where we buried the hatchet, dig it up, and wield that thing with deadly effect. And he who repeats a matter separates very close friends. If for some strange reason you would like to sever a relationship with a friend, keep on digging up the past. If you want to chase somebody off your bus, remind them of past mistakes, past sins, past failures. And that's a surefire way to do it. For my parents' 50th anniversary, this was 20-some years ago, our entire extended family, my brothers and all their kids and things, we went on a cruise to celebrate Mom and Dad's anniversary. For our middle daughter, Kelly, we bought her a new coat. Got back from the cruise, and turns out she'd left the coat on the boat. Okay, we didn't have a lot of money back then. You left your coat on the boat. You know, that was supposed to last you 2 years. Well, we talked it through. Apologies were made, and we ended up buying her a new coat, and life went on. But I could not seem to let it go. And from time to time, when I needed a little more ammo with an unrelated issue dealing with Kelly, I'd bring up the coat. And remember, you left that brand new coat on the boat. One night, I'm guessing like 18 months later, I did it again. I brought up that doggone coat. Later on that evening, I was Tucker and Nan, and she said to me respectfully, "Daddy, how much longer until we can stop talking about the coat? How many more times do I need to say I'm sorry?" And I realized in that moment how foolish I had been. And I looked at her and I said, "Kelly, never again, no more." Until this morning. That was a nice coat. We've got to keep our comments current, guys. If you say to a friend, "You always interrupt me," or you're never on time, those words "always" and "never," that refers to the past. And they're usually unproductive. It just makes people go, grrr. It's picking a fight. If we want our relationships to thrive, what value is there in bringing up the past? None. None. Let's leave the past in the past and move forward together. He who repeats a matter chooses to separate close friends. And that's also a vital vital component of a well-crafted response. So far, how can we keep peace on the bus? How can we manage conflict and keep that bus in peace? Take time before we respond And if we need to respond, craft our response carefully. That means it's redemptive, it's gentle, it's few words, and current, which brings us to the third strategy for maintaining healthy relationships with those 150 people in our lives. And here it is. Don't contribute to an argument. Don't contribute to an argument. Let's say the conversation's not going so well. And if for whatever reason, despite our very best efforts, it's turning into an unproductive argument, we need to do our part to shut it down. We can do this by applying one of my very favorite verses from the entire book of Proverbs. It is short and sweet and powerful. And here it is. Without wood, a fire goes out. Without wood, a fire goes out. Guys, just as it takes two to tango, it takes two to argue. And if we respectfully just withdraw from the battlefield, inevitably the argument will be diffused. It'll die down. It makes sense. No fuel, no fire. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. A number of years ago, our family went camping, and the adults we were all finishing up dinner in the cabin, and we said to Timothy, Eli, and Charlie, Cooper and family were living in Kentucky at that time, so we said, Timothy, Eli, and Charlie, why don't you boys go out and make the campfire for us, and we'll come out and sit around it in a little bit. Okay, so the boys hustled on out there with enthusiasm, and about 30 minutes later, we walked outside, and this is what we saw. Those guys were so proud of themselves. If you got within 10 feet of it, I think your glasses would melt on your face. All right, how'd that fire get so huge? Because the boys kept piling wood. In the morning, I went out to that fire pit. The whole thing had died down to some gray ash. You say, well, how did it die down like that? Well, obviously, the boys went to bed. They stopped piling on more wood. Okay, you see the point. If we want an argument to escalate from a campfire to a forest fire, just keep the words coming. But if we prefer for that argument to die down, just stop talking. Stop posting, stop texting, stop tweeting. Now, this doesn't necessarily resolve the issue that started the argument, but it sure keeps it from getting any worse. All right, well, there we have it. God's wisdom for managing conflict and keeping peace on our bus. Here it is. Take time before we respond. That's the first thing. And if we realize that we need to address this, then we better craft our response carefully. And if that isn't working and an argument's escalating, just find a way to diffuse that. Don't contribute to that argument. Okay, that's God's wisdom for managing conflict and keeping peace on our bus. 2024 is going to be here in a couple hours, and I don't know if you're going to end up living in a shipping container or a school bus. I'd rather live in a shipping container, I think. And I don't know if 2024 will be the year of the soup. But I do know this. I know this. Of the 8 billion people on planet Earth, you and I have all the wisdom we need to get along with the 150 people that God has placed in our lives. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be God-honoring? Wouldn't it be gospel-honoring if when the time comes for us to part ways, and it will come, that we could look at each other and say, it's been a pleasant ride together. Wow. So I ask you, as I ask myself, is there someone on your bus with whom the relationship is routinely, almost perpetually strained? More importantly, I ask you, is there something different, something wiser that you could do to change that situation? If there is, I encourage you not to wait. 2 months ago, I took my dear old dad to DFW Airport to put him on a plane to go back to Pennsylvania. And we talked about the next time we'd get to visit, he was going to come here, I was going to go there, what we were going to do. Before we parted, and I'd taken him all the way to the plane. I got a security pass and got him there. And right before we parted, he pulled me down and gave me a big hug, and we kissed each other, and we told each other how much we loved each other and said goodbye. I did not know that was the very last conversation I would have with my dad, this side of glory. So guys, I don't want to be morbid, but we never know when someone will step off our bus. So let's apply God's wisdom, and let's do it today. Amen? Amen. Lord, we know all too well that we're good listeners, but we struggle at the doing part. Let this help us this year to apply your words, and we thank you for them. In Jesus' name, amen.